Hi, I'm Shelby Hartman, DoubleBlind's co-founder and editor-in-chief, and I'm here to talk to you about shroom dosage. One of the trickiest things about shroom dosage is that there are more than 180 different kinds of psilocybin-containing mushrooms. One of the things that a lot of people don't understand is that there's a difference between shroom species and shroom strains. For example, Psilocybe cubensis is the most popular shroom species. Underneath Psilocybe cubensis, we have a variety of shroom strains that are also popular for cultivating at home, such as golden teachers, penis envy, and B+. In addition to there being a number of popular psilocybin strains which fall under Psilocybe cubensis, there are also many different kinds of psilocybin species, including Psilocybe semelanciata, known as liberty caps, and Psilocybe cyanescens, known as wavy caps. We write about some of the most popular ones on our website if you're interested. When we're talking about shroom dosage, obviously the biggest question is, okay, well, how potent are my shrooms? And there isn't a lot of information out there on the potency of different kinds of mushrooms. Psilocybe azurensis are widely known as being one of the most potent psilocybin-containing mushrooms. Mycologist Paul Stamets has written about this in his book. Under sort of the umbrella of Psilocybe cubensis, a lot of growers believe that penis envy or albino penis envy is one of the most potent strains. But the reality is that even though there's sort of myth and lore about the strength of these different strains and species, even if some of that is true, and I'm sure some of it is, no batch of a strain or species is going to be the same potency as another batch of that exact same strain or species, because it depends on where it was grown, how it was grown. Even two mushrooms that are growing next to each other in the same tub can have varying levels of potency. And also, a lot of people believe that the caps in the psilocybin mushrooms are more potent than the stems. And there was one study that was done that found that that was true. And so, if you have a mushroom and the cap is like this big, and then you have another mushroom and the stem is super long and the cap is super tiny, then the potencies are going to be different. So I just have to give kind of all of that as a disclaimer before we get into shroom dosage. Now you might be asking, okay, if I have no idea what the potency of my mushrooms are, then how am I supposed to figure out how many of them to take? And it's a tricky question. Really, most people do this by trial and error in the psychedelic community. We have an adage that says, start low and go slow. So if you are taking some mushrooms that you bought from a person who knew a person and they didn't give you any reliable information about how strong these mushrooms are, then you're going to want to be really careful about how much you take, especially if it's your first time tripping. Now let's talk about some numbers. Bear in mind that, as mentioned before, the most common species of psilocybin mushrooms are Psilocybe cubensis. So when we talk about these dosages in the psychedelic community, we are assuming that you are taking Psilocybe cubensis. Again, that could be golden teachers, penis envy, B+. There's a variety of strains that are Psilocybe cubensis, but just know that. A microdose is typically between 0.1 and 0.5 grams of dried psilocybin mushrooms. A low dose is between 0.5 grams and 2 grams of dried psilocybin mushrooms. A moderate dose is between 2 grams and 3.5 grams of psilocybin mushrooms. And a high dose, or what we sometimes refer to as a heroic dose, is 3.5 to 5 grams and anything above that. We get into this more in our microdosing course, which we just released, and which literally goes through everything you could ever possibly need to know if you're interested in microdosing. But just to give a little bit more context on that now, if you are looking to microdose psilocybin mushrooms, 0.5 grams is kind of a lot. I mean, if I do 0.5 grams, I am not able to go about my normal day, which when we talk about microdosing, we're really referring to what Dr. James Fadiman calls a subperceptual dose. You don't want anything to be happening that is noticeably trippy. And if you are, then that's not a microdose. So I would say somewhere between 0.1 and 0.3 grams is probably going to be your sweet spot. I would start around 0.1 grams. If you're really nervous, you could even go a little lower than that. If you're looking to have a trip, then you're probably going to want to start around a gram. Again, if you're really nervous, there's no harm in starting lower than that. You can start at 0.5 grams and take a little more after 90 minutes or 2 hours if you feel like you're not having the kind of experience that you want to be having. But I would just caution people against taking too little mushrooms as much as I would caution them against taking too many mushrooms, because it can be a little bit uncomfortable to be in that liminal space where you're not microdosing. It's not just elevating your mood. You're actually sensing like shifts in your environment, but you're also not quite like reaching into that other realm of consciousness that's going to give you the experience that you're really wanting. If what you're looking for is to experience what people talk about when they talk about tripping, which is like you're having, realizations about your life, your perception is shifting in a significant way. If you're looking to have what researchers often call the mystical experience, which is often described as this deep sense of unity with other people, with the greater universe. Sometimes people describe it as ineffable, which ironically means it can't be described in words. Then you're probably looking at a dose of at least 2 grams. Again, it really depends on your body and how many times you've tripped before. A lot of people who are really into tripping on mushrooms will do a minimum of 3.5 grams. 3.5 to 5 grams is, it's definitely gonna shift how you're feeling, and I would say, there are groups of people who do more than 5 grams. There was a legendary practitioner in the psychedelic space by the name of Kalindi Lee, who was known for doing more than 10 grams. I was just interviewing a native man named Shane Norte, who has a psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy church in Palomar Mountain, who administers sometimes as much as 15 grams to veterans and other people who come to what he calls his Wamkish, which is sort of his house where he holds the ceremonies. So people do lots and lots of mushrooms, and they come out the other end. I would really caution against that unless you are with people who are holding space for you, who know how to properly support someone who is going through an intense psychedelic experience. It's just probably not necessary for you to do more than 3.5 grams if you've never tripped before. And again, remember, you can always take more, but you can't take less. And so sort of our best practices for dosage are, number one, you gotta buy a scale. The most important thing, other than the mushrooms themselves, is the scale, because if you don't know how much you took, then there's really no way of knowing like if you should take more, or if you decide to trip again, like how your body responds to different dosages. I mean, you gotta have a scale. It's not optional. Weigh out your dose, take it, and then I would also recommend weighing out some extra amount of mushrooms, whatever you decide is comfortable, and putting those aside so that if 90 minutes or 2 hours passes and you're not feeling, like you're tripping as hard as you wanted to be tripping, that's already there for you and that's accessible, and you can just take that rather than kind of having to fumble with the bag and potentially taking too much. And generally speaking, tripping best practices are you want to get as much as you can set up for yourself before you take the psychedelic, so you're not thinking about like logistics or arranging your environment while you're trying to have a psychedelic experience. So what does that look like? Well, again, I can't tell you because I don't know you and I don't know your specific circumstances and I don't know what you're looking to get out of a psychedelic experience. But if you've never tripped before and you're really nervous about tripping, what this might look like is you might decide, okay, I'm going to take 1 gram of mushrooms. I'm going to weigh that out. I'm also at the same time going to weigh out 0.5 grams of mushrooms, and another gram, and I'm gonna set that aside, and then I'm gonna take the gram, and then I'm just gonna have my experience, and I'm gonna lay down, and I'm gonna put in my headphones, or I'm gonna start doing some deep breathing, or I'm gonna meditate, or to go on a walk if you have a trip sitter, or whatever. And I wouldn't, be focusing too much on the clock. I would just be focusing on your experience and letting it unfold. But you'll kind of know, after a little while, if you're feeling like, gosh, nothing's really happening, I'm not really getting what I want out of this experience, you can check in on the clock, or you can ask your trip sitter. Hopefully you have a friend there, someone who's holding space for you to check in on the clock. And if it's been 2 hours, it's fine to say, hey, look, I really think I want to take that extra 0.5 grams or whatever it is that you set aside for yourself. Until very recently, there was actually little that was known or proven about the potency of magic mushroom strains at all. In April of 2021, there was an event called the Psilocybin Cup, and over 60 strains from different growers were submitted, and the team of scientists there measured the potency in these different strains and compared them. And so, they only got less than, 10 of every strain, but it was just very eye-opening and interesting to compare the potencies in the same strains of mushrooms, and also to see which ones on average had more potency than others. For example, the scientists measured the potency of the various batches of tidal wave mushrooms that were submitted as a part of the Psilocybin Cup, and found that the range of psilocybin was actually from 0.14 all the way to 2.26% of psilocybin per dry weight. So that gives you a sense of, the wide range in potency that the same type of mushroom can be. They did find some overall takeaways that were interesting. For example, on average, penis envy mushrooms, which people have kind of anecdotally said for a long time are stronger than other types of mushrooms, were in fact stronger than at least the other mushrooms that were submitted as a part of the Psilocybin Cup. For example, penis envy mushrooms on average were found to be more potent than golden teacher mushrooms, which is also another really popular strain of Psilocybe cubensis. If you're interested in reading more about the data that the Psilocybin Cup found, you can check out their website. You can also read an article on our website that was written by one of the teachers of our mushroom growing course, Dr. Kay Mandrake, on all the different alkaloids in psychedelic mushrooms, which is another discussion. There isn't just psilocybin in psychedelic mushrooms, although that's often what we talk about. And that is what is being researched in the clinical trials, is just purely synthetic psilocybin. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the fact that dosage matters, but it's really only one factor among many factors that's going to contribute to how your trip unfolds and how sensitive you are to the trip itself. And, in the psychedelic community, we talk about set and setting, and we talk about set as being the mindset that you have when you go into your trip, and setting being the environment of the trip itself, whether you're in nature or at a party with friends. If you are in an environment where you feel really supported and comfortable, then you're going to have a very different experience than if you're in an environment, for example, where you're surrounded by a lot of people that you don't know. It's not to say some people don't have magical and transformative experiences tripping at Burning Man or wherever, at a party with friends. It's just to say that you should take into consideration who you're planning to be with and where you're planning to be when you are determining your dose. Because, 1 gram at home listening to music with your best friend is going to feel very different than 1 gram at a music festival. Tolerance also does make a difference. You can build up a mushroom tolerance over time. Now, if you're taking, several months in between every trip, then your tolerance is going to go back down to an extent, but it's just to say that if you're tripping all the time versus if you've never tripped before, then that is going to affect your sensitivity to the mushrooms. There was a peer-reviewed study that was published in 2012 in the journal PLOS One, and in addition to dose, they found the most important factors that contribute to the experience on mushrooms include a personality characterized by high levels of, quote, absorption, defined as one's openness to a variety of cognitive, perceptual, and imagistic experiences, being in an emotionally excitable state before taking psilocybin, and experiencing low levels of psychological distress in the weeks prior to your trip. So this gets back to kind of what I was saying before, which is that yes, dose matters, of course dose matters, but also your state of mind matters, how much intention you put behind preparing for your trip matters, who you're with matters. These are all things to consider as much as the actual dose itself. This is all to say that mushroom dosage is important, but there are a lot of other things to consider when you're trying to determine how strong you want your trip to be. So spend some time to think about what you're really looking to get out of this experience. Are you looking to just have fun? Have you felt called for a long time to trip on mushrooms but have been scared and really just want to kind of dip your toe into the psychedelic waters and see how you feel? Or are you looking to have a really intense, profound, and healing experience? These are all really important questions to ask yourself before you go into your psychedelic experience. If you're looking for more information on how to trip on shrooms or how to prepare for a shroom experience or anything else pertaining to shrooms or psychedelics, we have tons of articles on our website, doubleblindmag.com. We even have classes with the world's leading psychedelic experts if you're ready to go a little bit deeper. Safe travels.